Good evening. I am Paula Fontana, Vice President of Strategic Programming Initiatives with the National Black MBA Association, and it is my pleasure to welcome you tonight to Demystifying Digital Transformation. This is the first session of 4 in our 2021 Gold Key Access series, where we really lean into the challenges facing senior leadership. So I challenge you to register for all 4 of the series as you take your leadership to the next level. It is also my distinct pleasure to take this time to thank our sponsor Nationwide for their partnership in this work as we provide access and opportunity to our members interested in director level and above roles. So for tonight, we have engaged Tanya Eccles to provide this content for the series. So a little bit about Tanya. She is an award-winning international executive coach, a leadership consultant, a facilitator, a speaker, and a writer. Just a little bit about her background. LinkedIn recognized her as one of the standout executive coaches of the year for 2016 and 17. And her writing has been featured in several publications, including Forbes and HuffPost. Tanya has 25 years of experience in corporate management, business operations, media, technology, finance, coaching, and leadership development. And she takes all of this experience and applies it so that her background can connect with her clients, and she really draws on those real world experiences, helping them to achieve actionable solutions and accomplish their goals to become more impactful, transformational leaders. Tanya, welcome. We are ready to be transformed.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Paula. And thanks to all of you for taking the time this evening to hopefully demystify digital transformation as we work together and think through what does all of this mean? I know there's so much buzz in the world around digital transformation and we should be transforming things digitally. What does that mean? So tonight, that's really our focus, is to look at what does digital transformation mean, and hopefully take away perhaps some of the mystique and the uncertainty that comes around it. I have experience on the digital side and working with technical teams. I am not an IT guru by any means, and that's really why I wanted to put this presentation and this discussion together tonight, because this is really thinking about digital transformation for non-technical leaders as well. You're going to find some technical gurus who could really help you dive into any one of these topics. But I think what I really hope we can do this evening is start to connect to how do I, in my role as a leader, as an executive within my organization, begin to understand this language and think about how I can help to be a champion and an advocate for digital transformation in my organization. So that's what we're going to talk about tonight. I don't have to introduce myself because Paula did such a wonderful job. Thank you again for doing that. But I am excited to be here with you. And part of why I love this topic so much is because I spent a lot of time in the media industry. And I'll talk about this more later, but coming especially from newspapers and TV and radio, recognizing that in the late 90s and the turn of the century, with the rise of the internet, we were faced in that industry and continue to still be faced with, do we transform or do we not? And some entities were able to do so and some were not. So this is something that I think as we are really continuing to move full force toward even more technological advances and digital transformation, that we are ready to understand how we can support this and that we can be part of the future of our organizations. So what are we going to talk about today? We are going to cover first, understanding what is digital transformation. And we're also going to go through each of the key aspects of what digital transformation is. We're going to talk about some of the challenges and the barriers and ways we can address those, and then give you just a real jump start on how you want to start looking at a digital transformation strategy for your own organization. Let's start off with the very first question, the one that's probably the most important for all of you. what is digital transformation? And it seems a little squishy, I think, at times. The one thing I want to talk about, because there is such a focus on technology, I want us to recognize that it's not about technology taking over the world or taking over the human aspect of how we engage with customers and partners around the world. But there is something very powerful about digital transformation. One thing, the way I like to think of it, as opposed to digital transformation, is perhaps actually thinking of it as digital integration. And from that standpoint, when we think about it in this way, digital transformation or integration is really about the integration of digital technology into all aspects of an organization to help you better meet the needs of your customers and enhance the operations of your internal resources. Digital transformation is really taking on radical thinking, or radical rethinking, as a matter of fact, of how an organization uses technology, people, and processes to change business performance. So you want to think about digital transformation, and sometimes you may see it referred to as DX. There's always a cute little acronym for these sorts of things. But it's really about how do you find ways to find out what your organization can do with technology to enhance internal processes, to enhance how you're serving your customers, to enhance how you are actually serving your team members and your employees. It's going to help you look at the insights of digital transformation, recognizing that industry by industry, you'll find differences everywhere. But all digital transformation starts with moving from this analog into a more digital realm. And that's what we really want to make sure that we're keeping a focus on. Moving towards the digital, but also a key takeaway is that we want to place the customer at the heart of any strategy you have. This is not about technology for technology's sake. It's about understanding how I can leverage technology to create efficiencies, to transform my business, and to better serve my customers. That's what really drives digital strategy, or at least that's what drives successful digital strategies. And that's what we really want to focus on today. One thing I do want to help you all kind of get a little clarity on, in case there is any confusion, is that we hear different variations. There's digitization and digitalization, and then there's digital transformation, and which one's which and what does this mean? So I'm going to boil it down as simply as possible. And depending again on how your organization might be categorizing this, you might see some nuances that are different. But at the core, digitization is really taking something that's physical, like a paper document, and storing it in a digital format. This could be as simple as scanning something into a PDF. This could be taking notes from paper and putting them into an Excel spreadsheet, or it could be uploading entire reams of data into digital databases. Okay, so it's really just getting it out of the physical, tangible thing in my hand that I have to print and moving it into a digital format. Then we have digitalization, which is about transitioning our actual processes into a digital environment. So let's say I've created that PDF document. Now I want to upload it into the hard drive of the computer, or I want to upload it into the cloud and share it with other people. Or maybe I take an Excel spreadsheet that used to live on my desktop, I convert it into a Google Sheet, and that's stored in the cloud. And now other people can access it. So I've taken a process where I was the only one manually kind of involved in that human interaction, and I'm putting it in a format, in a digital format, that allows others to share and collaborate with me. It still requires human interaction to keep it up to date, but it's now through a process, as opposed to someone coming over to me and telling me something or giving me paper and I put it into the spreadsheet. Now I've created an outlet that others can collaborate and share together. All right, and then we have our digital transformation, and this is that next level where we're actually leveraging technology to change the organization. Now, this is surprisingly less about technology than you might expect. Technology is an important factor, but keep in mind, digital transformation is honestly more about people. than it is about pure technology. It requires changes that are customer-centric, that are backed by leadership, and driven by, again, that radical rethinking of corporate culture and leveraging technology to then empower and enable employees and customers to engage and interact in ways that are going to be most successful for them. So what does all that mean? Okay, it means digital transformation at its core, at its heart, is really about people. It's not just, as I said earlier, technology for technology's sake. It's about providing better products and services and support to our customers and our internal teams and operations. We don't want to overlook the human element. The human element is critical throughout all stages of digital transformation: collaboration, creating ecosystems, empowerment, culture of the organization. Human elements drive the goals of digital transformation. People don't want digital everything. If anything, I think we've all noticed over the years, while it's added a lot of convenience, there can also be a lot of frustration when the only outlet I have to address a problem or obtain something that I want is through a machine. So as humans, we are social creatures. Human connection is important to us. We do value human interaction. Digital transformation is about empowering customers and team members to get what they need when they need it through whatever medium best suits their lives and preferences. So it's really about how do we enhance human interaction with the efficiencies and the additional insights we can gain from technology. So keeping that in mind as we really start to move forward and look and think through what digital transformation might look like for you, the human element is always at the center of it. Now let's talk about, why do we do this? As leaders, we understand the importance of, it's not just enough that, oh, here's this new thing I want to do. We want to understand why it matters. Why do I want to take this on? So here's several reasons why, and I'm sure some of them are very obvious to some of you. Part of it is survival and market demands. There is this thought of, wait, why do I want to rip up everything? It's working perfectly fine now. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Why do we need to change it? Well, survival and market demands may be part of that. Changes in society, the way people consume your product or engage with your product can be highly disruptive. So when you're looking at transformation from a holistic perspective, yes, it may be working perfectly now, but what could happen a year from now, or 2 years from now, or 6 months from now, that could drastically change what the needs are of your customers? We have all experienced this firsthand in the past year. Everything has changed in how we engage, how we purchase, how we shop, how we communicate, how we socialize, and the dependence on technology grew. And organizations that were not able to adapt and shift didn't necessarily fare as well in the last year. I mentioned earlier that I came out of the media industry. And again, this is hundreds of year old industries, recognizing that US newspapers were pretty much what we might refer to as cash cows. Revenues came primarily from advertising, but also from subscriptions. But advertising was the big draw there. But the only reason we had the big draw for advertising was the circulation. And we look back in hindsight and we see that newspapers up through the 80s, oh my goodness, it was everywhere. And that was how you got a job. That's how you got an automobile. That's how you got a house. That's where you got your groceries. That's where you got news about entertainment and movies. Everything in many ways revolved around that newspaper, or around the newspaper. And then towards the end of that time frame, we had something called USA Today emerge. And they had that blue logo that everyone started to notice, and they delivered TV style news, but in that print format. So the stories were very short. Its vending machines looked more like TV sets. It was very much a rethinking of how people interacted or engaged with newspapers. So we saw that shift, that rethinking of how newspapers could survive and thrive. And then the internet came in the 90s, and that was a disruption. And you heard, for those of you who remember something called Craigslist, I know it's still out there, that changed how people bought and sold cars, houses, rented apartments, all sorts of things. And when the internet really exploded, newspapers in particular, but all media in many ways, had a choice to make. Do I transform, or do I try to maintain the way I'm used to doing things? And the reality was, a lot of newspapers chose to sort of do what they always did. And when aggregators like Yahoo and eventually Google came along and they were able to aggregate news, you didn't necessarily need your local newspaper, especially if you were in a larger market. So the newspaper industry, and to some degree TV and radio as well, had a very slow response. And in some cases, even an arrogance about, oh, this internet thing is never going to take over newspapers. We are the big one in the middle of all of this information. We are the ones who know how to deliver news. But those ad revenues dropped because the circulation numbers were dropping, and those time-tested business models that made so much sense before changed, and in many cases fell. Some, as we know, some industries, some newspapers were able to thrive. You look at the New York Times, you look at Washington Post, because they had content that was unique enough, perhaps, that allowed them to still draw the audiences that were there. But for certain size markets, even some small markets, that really started to shrink the impact of newspapers. Newspaper newsroom employment has shrunk by 50%. That I think Pew Research said recently that 27,000 journalism jobs have vanished since 2008. Many newspapers have gone into bankruptcy or sold off all of their news and TV and radio properties. So recognizing the importance of survival and meeting market demands, being aware of what your customers want, that is why you want to move towards digital transformation. Because I share with you my experience coming from the media industry. If you are slow to respond, or maybe again, even arrogant about your place in the industry, you might be on the wrong side of the new way of doing things, the new ways of working. Also, digital transformation is really important because it allows for data-driven decision-making. Digital transformation gives you more access to information about your customers, about how they're consuming or engaging with your products, your services, with your content, if you have that as well. It also helps you understand things, especially around inventory and restocking and logistics around getting your product around the world, around the country, around your city. You have data through digital transformation that allows you to really refine and enhance that and make it so efficient that you're really starting to impact not only the bottom line, but how your customers are able to access the information or the services that they need. Also, employee experience and expectation. Employees expect to come in and see that the organizations they work for are on the cutting edge. People want to learn and gain skills on not 20, 30-year-old technology, but on things that are more current, more recent. They want to be part of innovative projects and ideas. And also, outside of the work they do within the organization, the tools they're using for their human resources, for other access to benefits and support that they have within the organization. It's very important for them to know that the organization is investing not only in the customer side and the operation side of the business, but also in the internal functions. That am I on the latest form or version of an email platform? And am I able to use things like Slack? And do we have the security to make sure I'm able to use these things safely? Additionally, again, this year, we've seen so much change. There is an expectation that you can provide things in a virtual remote world. So if that reliance is purely on, oh, I need to get in front of people and see them, if anything, the last year has taught us that need is somewhat lessened and to some degree will not come back. There will be an expectation that I should be able to, if I want to, walk into a store or walk into an establishment or some sort of brick and mortar building and actually connect with a person and buy it that way. Or if I want to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning and order something, that I can do it that way as well. Okay, so that's what we really want to understand, is that the expectation from our employees and from our customers are changing rapidly, and they expect the people that they partner with as a supplier, as a vendor, as a customer, are up with those times. Also, technology gives us the ability to be more productive. It allows us to be much more agile, and it allows us to foster new innovations that may be coming in, not just transforming our business, but maybe creating something entirely new altogether. And that's what we really want to begin to focus on. And then finally, it kind of wraps up all of these together around reputation. You want to be known as the organization or the company or the product that has a really old style interface when you access their information on the internet. Does your company have an app that I can actually go through and have interactions or set up certain transactions that way? It's part of your brand. It's part of your reputation. It's part of what people think about you. Your ability to have engaged in the activities that allow your business to continue to thrive and grow through digital transformation. All right. So we talked about why, and one of the other reasons why I did want to dive into a little bit more is what's happened in the last year around COVID-19. And we have seen during the pandemic that consumers have moved dramatically towards online channels. And I know hopefully you all can see this. It's a little small, but McKinsey's done a lot of work. And actually McKinsey and Boston Consulting Group and many others have done a lot of work around this. But we see from June 2017 through July 2020, globally, we went from the average share of customer interactions that are digital being more in that 20% range globally to 58%. In Asia, similar, 22 to 53. Europe, 18 to 55. North America, 25 to 65, if anything higher here. What that also means is that many organizations have had a rapid shift toward interacting with customers through those digital channels. And the rates of adoption of moving things into that digital format have jumped ahead years. 3 to 4 years to be exact. And that was just in a matter of months last year. And again, we're seeing more of that. Look in Asia, they're at 4 years. Everyone else is around 3. And again, a matter of months, we made that much of a shift. So we want to understand the expectations, as I said before, are most important in understanding that you should be able to show up for your customers in the format that they want to engage with you in and when they want to have that interaction. And that requires us to get very sharp and be able to make these pivots around technology. Another study here from the McKinsey research, again, just looking at the impact of what COVID-19 has done in accelerating digital transformation around the world. Work from home, productivity, collaboration tools, security, all key parts of the workforce working from home virtual experience. So how much of that has changed? We see large increases, communication platforms, instant messaging, which we already had, but again, making sure we have them in ways that now I want to be able not just to send messages, but files. Video conferencing, audio conferencing, email, making sure you had voice over IP, integrating messaging apps so that employees can stay connected, right? Are you on Slack? Are you using the version of Teams? All of these ways that we can start to communicate with the expectation that this new way of working around technology is here to stay. Cloud-based project management, collaboration applications that are going to allow staff members to stay on top of ongoing projects, sharing documents, making updates in real time. That being said, you're thinking, well, some of that we were already doing within our organizations already in our office buildings. But now you have people dispersed all over accessing your internal programs and your internal databases from their homes and from their own internet and from their own Wi-Fi, which brings up data security. Data security is a major concern now because of the work from home environment, because now there are more ways that hackers and people who want to or who have malicious intent can find back ways to get into your systems. So we want to make sure that we are expanding the company's focus on data security and privacy. We want to provide remote workers with virtual or virtual private networks, or VPNs, to help prevent external actors from accessing data in transit or viewing communications between employees, especially some very confidential information that may be going around for your teams. We want employees' devices to have updated cybersecurity tools, antivirus, anti-malware, just to remove those threats before they can cause any damage in your systems. And also just establishing those disaster recovery protocols to protect against certain threats. The ransomware attack, we saw that this week with the effects of that on the pipeline that caused the gas, the gas run on the East Coast. We want to understand, how do we prepare for unplanned outages or disruptions? And what we saw with the pipeline issue that came up this week, they ended up not having, or at least so far, to have addressed it and corrected it relatively quickly without having to pay that ransom. We want to train our remote workers to recognize security threats and really strictly adhere to security standards and best practices, because that's going to reduce the risk of exposure now that there are more potential access points to leave that open for you. So just recognizing the impact work from home alone has placed on the need for digital transformation. And again, this doesn't even tie to customers yet. This is really more focused on your internal systems as you have more employees dispersed across the country and the world. All right. Let's talk about some key aspects of digital transformation. And there are 4 key areas that I'll cover today in our time this evening. But digital transformation covers a huge number of processes, interactions, technological evolutions, changes, internal, external, industry stakeholders across the board. So many different moving parts. And there are common challenges and goals and traits in organizations that are engaged in digital transformation across the world. But there are also enormous differences based on your industry, based on your region, even based on your organization. So what makes sense in one region doesn't necessarily make sense in the other, especially if we consider government regulations, we consider society, economic conditions, industry disruption. So it's clear that changes and shifts in society have an impact on organizations, and it really can be highly disruptive. But with that said, there are these 4 key areas of focus that everyone wants to consider when you're looking at digital transformation. So we have customer, our operations, culture, and innovation. Remember, I said earlier, digital transformation, at the core of a lot of it, outside of the technology itself, are people. So we want to start with the customer focus. Let's talk about customer focus. Customers should be at the center of any digital transformation strategy that you put together. Not putting that customer experience first is going to risk sending them running off to others, to your competitors, or to other products that they may use instead of yours, or other services. If that user experience is confusing, they will leave. So it's important that not only is that user experience engaging, but that it's consistent, and that customers are able to do what they need to do, when and how they want to. Otherwise, they're going to look elsewhere. So one of the things you want to think about is rethinking, again, the customer experience. You want to employ things like design thinking. Design thinking is what puts the end user first, and it addresses their environment, what they need, even most importantly, their unknown needs. When you're doing things like ethnographic research and surveys and interviews and following them through processes and following them through different ways they engage with your product or services, you can get some really rich data sets about customers and the environments and the challenges that they have. You then can take these data sets to create insights that are going to lead to ideas that can be tested through quick developed prototypes. And we'll talk a little bit about agile development later, but that is the foundation of agile development. It's about creating the minimum viable product quickly, testing it, and either scrapping it, adjusting it, iterating it again, and then testing it again, right? The product concept can be refined based on these tests, and then you get the customer feedback immediately. And then once you have that product, you can bring it into market and continue to refine it. Mass Mutual, which is a major insurer here in the United States, they have $38 billion in annual revenue. By collecting and analyzing customer data, the company realized that any new life insurance product created was not likely to appeal to that under 40 demographic. These consumers needed to be educated about why a policy mattered to them. So MassMutual developed an education-focused buying experience based on what it called a master's program for adulthood. So instead of providing just an online learning program, MassMutual created a multi-channel experience that included a budgeting and financial tools and a curriculum that really helped potential new customers understand what was a good value for them. It offered offices with classrooms and libraries. And because the program was so different from what they usually offered, the entire organization had to be redesigned to support it. So they created business transformation, digital transformation based on that customer experience. Again, businesses need to understand where customers want to engage with them, what customers want to have fulfilled, and how they want to engage with that brand. So we talked about the data, the customer preferences and patterns, and also we want to make sure we understand the diversity of our customer base, recognizing depending on where my customers are they in Latin America? Which part of Latin America are they in? Are they in Brazil? Do I need to make sure I have people who understand Portuguese to understand what the needs are as opposed to the rest of Latin America that speak Spanish? Do I have people in Europe? Which parts of Europe are they in? Which parts of Africa? Which parts of APAC? So you want to make sure that you have a customer focus that looks at the diversity of your customers. And again, that applies directly to their needs, how they engage, when they want to engage, what format they may be engaging with you through. Okay. So now let's talk about operations. Operational change is what most people think of when they consider digital transformation. And it is obviously at the core where you see a lot of the technology side of it come in. That's where we want to make sure that we are looking for new opportunities all the time to integrate technology into new aspects or different aspects of our business. One of the ways that we can do this is having an agile approach to even our mindsets as leaders. It's about what is that minimum viable product? Gone are the days of us going out and having a 6, 8, 12, 18-month project, pushing it out to the world, and then no one wants it, right? We don't go into the black box anymore. The goal now with this agile approach is that we want to learn, we want to iterate, and then we want to improve that minimum viable product, the MVP, and then we industrialize it. Then we scale it and send it out. So we want to make sure that we have this agile framework, this agile mindset in mind of being able to build prototypes quickly, learn from them, iterate, and then continue to push them out and continue to scale them over time. We want to make sure we have the human integration. As I said earlier, humans are social creatures. We still want some level of human interaction. This is not about the machines taking over and replacing our human workers. Yes, there are efficiencies that we can find that may require or allow us to take people, even potentially people out of dangerous, hazardous working conditions and allow machines to do that. But that doesn't mean we can't retrain people and integrate them back into other areas of our business with new skills. So we want to make sure that we're keeping that human element in our operations as well when we're thinking about digital transformation. We also would consider and want to most likely consider, depending on what your resources are, bimodal IT, bimodal infrastructure. So this is where we manage that risk that we feel of transformation of, wait, we can't transfer everything over because we still have these systems that are core to our business that have to live on this old platform until we can upgrade them. So when you have a bimodal infrastructure, it allows organizations to manage that risk by keeping a mode 1 team who is supporting new applications. And then you have that second team that's going to manage those mission critical applications that aren't quite ready to be rolled over yet. So you may have to look at how do I manage and maintain, or you will most likely have to look at how do you manage and maintain two systems to keep things moving forward to mitigate the risk of this transformation you're trying to create while still maintaining the business you have for the moment. At the core of anything you're doing around operations and technology, you want to make sure that you're balancing in the needs of the customer, the needs of the business, because remember, this is about the business we're running. We've got to look at those balance sheets and income statements and what are our capital expenditures and how are operating expenses impacted? How does this impact potentially different regulatory requirements we have to consider? So it's really important that when you're looking at technology, and again, people get a little shiny object syndrome around digital transformation. Yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff you can do, but you want to make sure that it's right for your customers and it's also right for your business and the vision and the mission that you have for your business as well. And then, of course, we know digital transformation from an operational standpoint can create great elements of efficiency and productivity. So make sure that you're not overlooking those opportunities as well. Next, we want to talk about culture. So I remember, still about people. It's all about people. And it's important that your organization culturally is aware is prepared for that digital transformation. So here are just a few things that we want to keep in mind when we think about preparing our organizational culture for true digital transformation. First of all, we want to look at leadership. A couple of ways we want to consider this. First of all, we want to make sure we have leadership that's bought into this idea of being in this mode of digital transformation, that they have bought in and are aware of the benefits and how it's going to allow them to continue to thrive in the future. Also around leadership, you want to have people who understand the technology. Now, I say that because the first thought everyone has is, well, I need top-notch, new way of thinking, innovative CIO or CTO. Yes, great, you want those, but true digital transformation is not limited to the chief technology officer or the chief information officer. You want to make sure that everyone is starting to gain these skills and gain some level of understanding about how technology can impact their area. Is it advertising? Is it production? Is it customer service? You want everyone engaged in this. So it's important that the leadership be fully connected. Also, vision and purpose. We don't want to, as I've been saying before, implement new technology and new systems just for the sake of it, just because it's cool, just because we can. You want to have a clear vision and purpose around what you're trying to achieve and how it's going to support your customers, support your business, continuing to grow and thrive into the future. You also want to look at your talent base. Do you have enough diverse talent of people from different backgrounds, different skill sets, different specialties that they focus on to be able to bring in all of this new information, new ways of thinking, not only from a technology standpoint, but also from a hierarchy standpoint. The new reality is that hierarchical thinking no longer works in today's disruptive environment. Successful leaders create work cultures where employees are encouraged to try to solve problems with those iterative experiments. Employees who are willing to experiment and improve and take risk is part of that broader phenomenon of being able to transition and transform your business using technology and digital methodology that will help your company continue to grow. It's about changing not just technology and operations, it's changing the way we think. We want to break down those silos. We want to make sure that we've created perhaps a flatter structure in our organization so people have self-organizing teams. They, again, are empowered to go after and work on different areas that may not be in their very strict job description, but being able to apply talent and willingness to work at whatever product in whatever part of the team that's possible. And that's a big shift from how we're used to thinking about hierarchy within our organizations. By its nature, digital transformation requires people to change their ways of working, to break out of those silos and collaborate on key projects, collaborate on innovation. So corporate restructuring can eliminate some of these silos that exist, but that's a long process. And we want to make sure that in the interim, we are empowering our employees to jump in and lead. Again, self-forming teams. How do we help organizations or help our organizations start to think of their environment as an opportunity for all of us to grow, to take ownership, take on tasks that may not normally fall in our wheelhouse. Talked about the silos. We want to leverage that internal knowledge, right? So let's leverage, we want to make sure we're not forgetting the people who got us here and forgetting that they have an understanding of why we do things. So we want to leverage that internal knowledge so that when we're creating and transforming our business and moving to integrate technology more into what we're doing, that we're actually pulling those people in and using that institutional knowledge to help really build the next generation of our systems without losing the core understanding of why we do what we do. All right. Communication is also key. This gets into change management, things that I'm sure many of you have already considered around this, but you want to, great to have a vision and purpose, but you also want to be able to communicate it clearly. You want to make sure that people understand why you're doing it, understand how it impacts them, and give them the opportunity for two-way communication, to include their feedback, to have them be part of this transformation process. Again, we don't want to create these black boxes where people come in and come out with these answers and tell everybody, go change everything. The more you can incorporate people into the process of the transformation, the more you can get their buy-in and their input, the more likely your transformation is going to be successful. We want to talk about also the workforce transformation strategy, making sure, and I mentioned this a little earlier, that we are prepared to understand who's going to be impacted by these digital or technological advances and how that's going to impact their jobs and what does that mean for their future. We want to have some plans for things like flex forcing, for things for all-out retraining of people to help them prepare for, your job used to be this, that's an outdated technology, now it's going to be this, and how do we train you to help you get prepared to take on this new role? And in general, we want to have employee services, employee support, certain programs, coaching, all sorts of things that's going to be there for those employees to help them with the transition. Again, this is about people, and just telling someone, hey, here's your new job is not necessarily the best way and the most sustainable way to create change in your organization. You want to help people be prepared, not just mentally and cognitively into how they do their new job, but also emotionally and understanding how they want to show up from that sense of choice and that sense of excitement. You want to create those advocates and those champions within your organization. Businesses want to focus on attracting and retaining talent. The emphasis needs to be placed on creating a culture that really enhances healthy engagement, psychological safety, and allows employees to feel included and as though they belong if we really want to achieve desired business outcomes. Again, we are social creatures, but the work also has to get done. So we want to make sure that we're creating an environment where people are excited to come to work or to walk over from their living rooms and come to work if it's virtually. Recognize Zoom's monthly subscriber base jumped from 10 million in December 2019 to over 300 million in March 2020. So we want to understand, we want that connection. Culture is a part of that. Yes, technology is important, but we also want to make sure culture is covered as well. I know we are getting close here on time, and I have a lot more to share, but I will cover all of it here and get you all moving forward. I did want to make sure we touched on some of the digital transformation technologies that we are seeing that are helping to foster digital transformation. So automation is usually the first thing people think of when they consider digital transformation, but moving beyond automation of traditional management systems to reinvent operations. Amazon now delivers inventory to workers in their distribution centers as opposed to sending workers to collect the inventory. We want to find ways to automate and make our systems more effective. Artificial intelligence is, again, our machine learning. How are we able to recreate certain functions with the data and the use of software that allows us to help our customers in a more robust way in a virtual environment? So Sephora, for those of you familiar with Sephora, incorporates AI into models that match skin tones and virtual reality sampling. So I can have an at-home shopping experience of buying products at Sephora online that is very close and in some ways maybe superior. So we want to make sure we're looking at things like artificial intelligence. You engage with artificial intelligence every day. If you have a Gmail account or your company's on a Google business account, the type assist, and you can see where it's starting more and more to fill in more words for you. That is artificial intelligence, machine learning. I talked a little earlier about your customer data and intelligence. That's a rich data set that can truly help us start to understand what our customers want when they want it. We want to have access to mobile apps. So much happens on our phones now, making sure we're looking at and leveraging our ability to create those maps. Augmented and virtual reality. Those are two different things, but they're very connected. And it's about understanding what we can help people experience by either adding information to what they're seeing or creating an entirely new environment for them to understand and test things out. Cloud infrastructure has become so important. Gone are the days, or to some degree, gone are the days of having those big data centers we all used to have with racks and racks and racks of machines. We're now moving towards having everything in the cloud, and we want to continue to make that as safe as possible. Blockchain technology was originally used to support Bitcoin. And, we all heard yesterday about Tesla is no longer going to accept Bitcoin because the blockchain technology underneath it uses an insane amount of electricity, and it's not environmentally all that great for the world. So there are still challenges with it, but blockchain is really intended to be a much more secure way, excuse me, of transferring data in these chained segments to keep them safer and they're not mutable. Excuse me. Digital twins, excuse me. Digital twins allow us to do more robust modeling where we're actually putting sensors on real life cars and other models that allow us to create digital models so we can test things out and get an understanding real time of how they're performing and opportunities we can take to continue to improve those particular products or services. And then the Internet of Things and Industry 4.0, really big picture. Internet of Things, I am so sorry. The Internet of Things is really a concept that looks at connections between physical objects, sensors, machines, and the internet. And then you have the IIoT, which stands for the Industrial Internet of Things. And that's a concept that refers to making connections between people and data and machines, but in the manufacturing world. And that's Industry 4.0 is really about that new phase of the Industrial Revolution. We're almost there. Innovation, again, was that fourth aspect. And it's really about understanding the difference between innovation, creating something new, transformation, which is taking something that already exists and making it, rethinking it, recreating it, redesigning it, and then disruption, where something entirely new shows up. And we want to make sure that when we're focusing on innovation as part of our digital transformation, that we understand, are we managing disruption or are we truly trying to innovate? Also, a big thing around innovation and digital transformation is sustainability. Environmental impacts. We want to use the data that we can collect to better understand how we can create efficiencies that help sustain our planet, that allow us, again, to perhaps take people and humans out of more dangerous roles or find alternatives to some of the things that we're using now. Internet of Behavior, it's that natural evolution of the Internet of Things where we are looking at all the data that we're collecting through Facebook and social media and all of these other places and thinking about how we can actually impact human behavior. I'm not going to go too much into that one because there are a lot of privacy and ethical issues around that, but no, that is indeed coming. And then, of course, cybersecurity and privacy, as I mentioned before, a big, big area of development, especially given our increased use of remote access. With that said, 70% of digital transformations fail. So, whoa, wait a minute. Everyone's talking about digital transformation, but we see from several studies, including this one from the Boston Consulting Group, that successful digital transformations are difficult to execute. The technology is important, but it's the people dimension that is really the determining factor. Organizational inertia is really coming from that deeply rooted behavior within the culture. So that's what makes transformation so challenging. So how do we want to address it? We want to, as I said earlier, look at culture, work on employee buy-in, look at challenges we have around having a clear strategy, or are we just chasing technology or chasing innovation for the sake of being first? We want to look at our leadership. Do we have people who are qualified to help lead us in thinking and building this new future for ourselves? And as I said before, cultural changes, big challenge to suddenly go from a highly hierarchical system into something that may be flatter and more agile in how we show up. And again, do we just have the technological savvy as an organization to figure this out? Without that, digital transformation is nearly impossible. We overcome those challenges by educating and empowering our employees, creating that clear strategy. We want to have digital savvy in our leadership, but recognizing that's not just in the CTO or the CIO position. This is everyone recognizing I'm looking for ways to integrate technology into what my team, what my function, what my division does. Communication plans, clear communication plans are highly important. We want to look at new ways of working. We want to rethink, as I said, how we engage, and are there new ways to do things that don't require the same level of human interaction, or that making that human interaction more optional. And then, of course, internal digital upgrades. You can't have the front end be all shiny and fast and new, but the people behind the scenes are still with baling wire trying to keep the systems going. You want to make sure you are giving your employees access to the internal benefit of those upgrades as well. And finally, how do you jumpstart your digital transformation? You want to identify a digital transformation team, a group that's going to be focused on moving this forward and making this happen. You want to have a very thorough business and industry assessment to see what the opportunities are within your own organization, within the industry, new technologies, and also your competitors. Then you want to define that strategy, prioritize initiatives, and then engage and educate your employees. Start to create that cultural change that this is who we are as an organization, and digital transformation is part of our future. You want to research and reimagine the customer experience, and then have that very in-depth infrastructure review and redesign to think about how do we start to prepare and set ourselves up for being this transformed business going forward. So I went a little bit over, but I'm going to pull it back over to Paula, and we'll see if we have time for any questions here. If we do, but if not, we can just turn it back over. So you all let me know. I know I went a little over today. Got us so excited.
No, you actually are good on time, and we have time for probably a couple questions if you're up for it.
Yeah, and I see James here mentioned Elon Musk's words will have a big impact on the decline of cryptocurrency, for sure. That was a big thing yesterday when that came out. And I honestly didn't realize, I knew it took a lot of energy to mine Bitcoin. When you mine Bitcoin, you're doing some pretty complex algorithm and calculations to solve this mathematical problem, basically. And it takes a lot of electricity, almost as well, actually as much as some countries in the world. We're using more to mine Bitcoin in electricity than we are in New Zealand for the country to actually run. So we want to make sure that as we do this digital transformation, we're thinking about the environment for sure. I see from Jennifer, how will digital transformation benefit developing communities and helping to improve inequality within the United States and abroad? And that's a wonderful question. I love that, because we are seeing this all over. Even in the US, we've seen the expansion of access to the internet over this past year, especially looking not only in urban areas, but rural areas as well, making sure that everyone has access to the internet, has access to digital tools. It is now no longer just a nice thing to have. It is expected now that everyone has this access. So I think we've seen the need for everyone to be working from home. Again, accelerate that light years ahead, maybe half a light year ahead to make sure that everyone has access. But we're also seeing in developing countries, especially in Africa, which is also a concern because we see countries coming into Africa to help them build out their infrastructure of technology, but also recognizing that nothing's for free and nothing just because we're nice people sometimes. And what does that mean politically for those countries that are getting outside external countries to come in and help build that infrastructure? So in the short term, and I think long term, it helps them to get that access. But we also want to look at what are the political and socio-political impacts of having external countries come in and build that infrastructure and maintain it and control it. So I think it's a little bit of a mixed bag from that standpoint, but I do think the overarching movement towards making sure everyone has access to digital infrastructures and internet is headed in the right direction, but we want to make sure we're watching what's the price that has to be paid for these countries coming in to developing countries and setting up these infrastructures that they then control. How are we on time there? Oh, you're muted.
Approximately 5 more minutes.
5 more minutes. Love it, love it, love it. Lots of questions here from James. So James, as we look at digital transformation, traditional companies appear to be laggards in the life cycle adoption, as opposed to earlier mainstream adopters. What would you propose for facilitating traditional companies embrace digital transformation to stay competitive and not be usurped by market disruptors? And I always say one of the best predictors of future behavior is past behavior, right? So this is, again, we all know a lot of these stories, but you talk about Kodak inventing the digital camera and choosing to shelve it. That's why I went into that probably deeper discussion than you expected on newspapers, but it's important to understand that an organization or an industry that is making tons of money within 10 to 15 years could almost be completely disrupted by something else if you're not willing to jump in there and make that happen. We see it with what happened with taxi cabs, right? For all those people, especially in large cities like New York, who are paying thousands of dollars for those medallion licenses, totally disrupted by Uber and Lyft. So I think the more you can show them the impact of being the laggard, being the one who's like, oh, we're fine, we're so solid, show them the examples of the companies that thought they were solid and they aren't. There's a reason there's Netflix right now and not Blockbuster on all of your apps and where you're watching a lot of your movies. If you're not willing to change when you see the market changing, you will be left behind if you're not completely overtaken altogether.
So we'll take one more question.
Yeah, let me see if there's anything. There's still a few in here. I'm not going to get to all of these. Another from James. As we are in the third wave of IT, how do we help older generations shift from manual labor to a more digital platform in terms of skills and capabilities? And I think you mentioned that before I talked about the workforce transformation. But the more we can do to get training and education for older generations, but honestly, even I'm a Gen Xer. So on the older end, even of the Gen Xers, there are folks who may still not have adapted to the more digital platform of the skills and the resources that they need to be familiar with. So it's really about getting them as access to as much education and training as possible, I think is going to be key. And recognizing, and I think they are recognizing to some degree, that if they aren't able to make those transitions, we are going to, that they don't have as many options for jobs. So it's really important that they get access to it and see that that is really the opportunity if they want to continue to work longer, and even just to function in society more, because everything is getting harder for all of us as new things happen every 6 months. So we want to make sure that we give people access, because a lot of that fear of change is the fear of the unknown. It's not the change itself. It's just, what if I can't do it? What if I can't understand it? And we want to have the patience and give people access to learn these new skills, to learn these new platforms, and to show that they still have a lot to give and a lot to help others with their institutional knowledge, even if they're still learning some of the newer things. Don't apologize for the questions. This is great. This is great, James.
Well, great. Thank you, Tanya. This was amazing. I know I learned tons. So again, thank you so much for your time as well as for your continued partnership through this series. You are amazing. And
Thank you.
speaking of amazing, thank you to our sponsor Nationwide for your partnership as well in this important work that we are doing. And thank you all for your time this evening for tuning in. So we would love to get your feedback and your thoughts. I encourage you to click on the link that you see in the chat box. The first 25 people to click on that link and fill it out will be entered in a chance to win an Amazon gift card. So do not delay. So click on the link, fill out the survey, attend the next session, and last but certainly not least, have a wonderful rest of your evening. Good night.